25 plus WAM.
Okay. So this time 2 years ago, Cyclone Pam hit Vanuatu, and that's one of the worst natural disasters that the nation has ever seen. So what happens with this kind of disaster is that you get their homes absolutely destroyed. So Pam left 65,000 people homeless. And on top of their homes being destroyed, you also get their crops and their water supply completely useless. And aid is often days or even weeks away due to roads and airports being damaged. And Pam is once off, there's actually 5 months of danger each year during the wet season for cyclones. And because of the constant nature of this threat, we propose to create a process, not a product, which will empower the communities to be self-sufficient in their disaster relief. And in doing this, we'll bridge the gap between disaster and aid. So what we've come up with is a subterranean storage unit for post-disaster relief. So in that, we're going to have medical supplies, short-term food supplies, subsistence crop seeds, and safe drinking water. And we're looking at having 2 of these for the average Vanuatu community.
Yeah, so in the wake of Pam, Vanuatu's economy took a significant hit, symptomatic of prolonged recovery periods. We plan to create a process that will drastically cut recovery time by having essentials stored in a subterranean receptacle close to town. By having the shorter distances, we not only cut down on time, but cut down on the risk of interruption along the way. The Vanuatuan people are extremely aware of their environment, as it is part of their culture and income. Thus, it is imperative that our design is extremely environmentally friendly. To this end, we plan to use bamboo in our storage units, making them effectively a carbon sink. Bamboo is very easy to grow, with a hectare being able to store 250 tons of carbon dioxide. In addition to this, by using locally sourced materials, we're able to cut costs and carbon emissions produced in transporting heavy materials great distances. In terms of water filtration, we plan to use a biological filter in the form of a sand filter. We believe it is the most appropriate choice as it filters out harmful bacteria as well as not producing the harmful toxins and pollutants that charcoal filters produce. In this way, we plan to make our process as environmentally friendly and respectful to the Vanuatuan people.
Our product strives to be as culturally sensitive as possible. Rather than reinforcing the idea of, hey, you've been doing it all wrong approach, we're providing a process that is congruent with the cultural aspect of the Vanuatuan way of life. We're providing environmentally friendly tools, but the recovery is all in their hands. Post-disaster reliefs require the immediate access of equipment, medical supplies, water, and food. Without clean water and food, this potentially increases the chances and spread of vector-borne and communicable diseases. Immediate temporary access to these supplies involves the method of transporting, collecting, and storing. As Vanuatu heavily relies on foreign injections and support for post-disaster relief, Vanuatu is becoming increasingly dependent on foreign aid. Hence, this increases expense costs and expense crucial time waste. What we're doing is providing a process that involves a biofilter that delivers immediate and continual access to clean water and necessary supplies for post-disaster relief citizens of Vanuatu without any further complications.
So what we're proposing as our solution is a rectangular shaped container that is 4 meters by 2 meters by 1 meter. On the left, we will have our water supply, and on the right, we'll have our dry storage in the form of containers, which are segmented based on whatever the community needs to have in them. The majority of construction is going to be of bamboo, which has a very high strength to weight ratio. It has a similar tensile strength to steel and a much higher compressive strength than concrete. And the plastic lining is going to be for the water storage to waterproof that and keep it in sort of a bladder. The location is obviously very important to achieving our goal. It needs to be centrally located to achieve that community aspect, but it also needs to be in a non-flood prone area. So we're planning on an elevated plain close to the village. Our current capacity we're planning for is a 4-day water capacity, which is 2 4,000 litre units, and the supplies in the dry section are going to be tailored to the community needs, what they need to recover, and that's approximately 4 to 5 days worth of supplies. For the filtration, we're planning on a multi-stage sand filtration system as previously stated, and we're going to need a pump system for that. That's going to be a mechanical pump, which is reasonably low tech and is already a quite well-founded technology.
In order to create self-sufficiency in the long term, it is essential that we are able to remove ourselves from the equation in the long term. There cannot be a dependency on us being there in order to continue to implement and use the system. To do this, we have identified 3 areas that our project must meet, It needs to educate, it needs to empower, and it needs to be able to evolve. Firstly, education. This is sort of in two areas. Firstly is the engineering. How do we actually put the project together? What are the specifics of working with the bamboo and other materials? Secondly is the recovery. We need to create an initial plan before the disaster happens. That can be adapted later, but there needs to be something in place to begin with. If you have a look at our two flowcharts here, you can sort of see the difference between education as a starting point, in that as soon as you implement education, it becomes a community-based project and doesn't require us creating independency rather than dependence. Secondly is empowering. We want to create agency as opposed to creating the dependence that a lot of aid unfortunately does. You create a reliance on it, and it's not self-sustaining. In order to do that, we need to impart confidence in the community's collective means to address the issue themselves. We're doing this by using locally sourced materials. It's going to be community constructed, and of course it's going to be community operated. Finally, it needs to be able to evolve. If we're stepping back from the project, it needs to be able to adapt to different circumstances, to different communities, etc. And because we're creating a platform as opposed to a static product, it's able to do this. It adapts to community needs, and it's driven by community decisions, the communities that know best about what is needed post-disaster.
So in essence, what we're proposing is a brand new way for the Vanuatuan communities to think about disaster relief. So a lot of work is always going on around the world to better protect communities from natural disasters and better prepare them so that they minimise the damage. And that's all phenomenal work, and we want that work to continue. But what we're proposing is, in the interim, a completely instant access to clean water, food, and medical supplies, so that once a disaster happens, because the fact is they live in a disaster-prone area, once it happens, they have immediate access to all of these supplies to begin rebuilding themselves straight away. The fact is, once we looked into it, we found that when something like Cyclone Pam hits, that's not the end of the damage. Cyclone Pam, or any other disaster, is just the first of a whole line of dominoes. And what we want to do is stop the rest of the chain from falling. So by implementing a process such as this and empowering these communities to promote it themselves and implement it themselves, we're providing a way so that when disaster strikes, they don't need us, they just need themselves. Any questions?
Bamboo is a material, when it's put underground, it degrades pretty quickly and it's quite parasite prone. Are you sure its structural integrity is going to hold up to the things you say if it's going to break down in about a year?
That's a very good point. So actually what we're planning on doing is having the bamboo as the structural members, but around it having concrete or some form of aggregate to prevent it rotting and getting those sorts of diseases. Yeah.
Additionally, it's treatable. It's very easy to treat. You use something called borax, and that fixes the issue.
So it seems pretty expensive. I'm just wondering how you're going to pay for it.
The areas that are the most expense are things like sand filters, but you don't actually need to buy everything to do with it. There are only small areas that you need to buy. Bamboo is locally sourced. Most of the materials that we're looking at here can actually just be taken from the environment around it.
Yeah, but also I mean like the construction phase, like you have to dig underground. That's going to seem to have a lot of issues with like ground subsidence and stuff, so that would be expensive.
I mean, we're talking about a low depth, so there's not huge amounts of issues with creating sort of forms for it to fit, and it's all community done. It's not something that we're bringing people in to construct.
So can you answer the question, what's the price, cost?
It's something we're looking into, but we can't.
Yeah.
You need to be able to, obviously.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
You mentioned concrete, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you are burying it and there is a cyclone, have you considered what if debris gets in the way of accessing the pod? Is that what it is now?
That's, so can we, just go back to one of my fantastic diagrams. If you have a look here, we've actually got colours for each of these sections, and all they need to do is move whatever's over the colours, and these will be fairly rigidly constructed, and they aren't going to blow away and latch down, so they just need to move it off. And
what I mean is that when you say it's not like the debris could be stuff like trees and houses.
So we're considering putting multiple units per community in like opposite ends, so that if a tree or an avalanche or something like that does occur, they'll have backup.
But it could definitely increase the time to access the blocks, right?
it could, yes, but
We're speaking about hours rather than
Yeah, like if 8 is weeks
not
away.
weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't fall answer a question.
sorry.
Last question, please.
If you're stockpiling tools and food that generally you need to have, you know, enough to function outside of that as well as have ones to put in. Do they have, like, I know they use, you know, like wood digging tools and stuff like that. Can they afford to buy extra tools to put underground and extra food to put underground to actually run this?
So what we're
I'll take it.
yeah. So what we're planning is their existing tools and supplies they can put in immediately before, and then replenish that with extra stuff that comes from aid afterwards. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, additionally, if you look at the cost of doing that as opposed to the cost of, I mean, these are tools and stuff that are going to get destroyed anyway. So all we're doing is moving them to a safe place. If we're doing it just before.
Then they can't use them.
Sorry?
Well, they can't use them
During
if they're
the cyclone.
underground. No,
Yeah.
during the non-cyclone.
Well, there's a warning for cyclone. It's not
Not
like
always.
It's
There's very little warning in Vanuatu.
Yeah. Would you not have to dig up the box, put all the stuff in?
It's not a matter of digging it up. It's not something that's removed. It's something you lift the lid off and you open it up.
Yeah. Thank you. Just good. I don't want you to answer this, but think about this. So, just where that question's taking you is security. Is somebody going to come in and nick the supplies? First of all. Number two, not everybody behaves like that. Reasonably. Number two, some of your supplies are perishable, so you need some system to be regularly replacing food, or are they long-term foods that will last? You need to think about whether it is your perishability. I'm very interested in the broad approach you're taking, so I encourage you to think about whether you can, in some way, at least draw a scenario of the benefits, draw a picture of the benefits, maybe even, in a very simple way, model the benefits, so that you can pull out, you're dealing with a classic ecosystem here, and here are all the elements which can put in them, but you need to do more than wave your hands, you need to be able to articulate that argument, because that will be very good. And think through how many does it need to make this fairly viable, your scale and all that sort of stuff. They're the challenges. Okay, very good. Thanks for that.
Thank you.